they were like, let's give you the epidural because if not, it's going to be a true emergency C-section. Your husband will not be allowed in the room. We will rush you off and you will be under anesthesia. You won't get to see your baby.
Mm-hmm.
So if we give you the epidural, at least that way he can be in the room. You'll be awake during it. So I was like, fine. That for that reason, I will get the epidural.
Yeah.
So they gave me the epidural and something happened after that where his heart rate leveled back out. I don't know if it like relaxed my body or something just happened with the baby. I don't know what happened with him, but he ended up being okay after that. And after the epidural, that one actually really did work and I fell asleep. They came and woke me up and said, "You're at a 10, it's time to push." And I pushed him out and everything was fine. So again, I felt happy, but not like I was happy that the baby was safe and everything was fine, but I still wasn't like feeling like super joyful and calm and empowered and
Mm-hmm.
like it wasn't like that feeling that I got after Jack's home birth where it was like I felt like I was in control and like it was just different than the midwifery care model that I got with Jack's home birth.
Hey, you're listening to Empowered Births at Home with me, Esmeralda, the home birth doula, as your host. I am a mama of three, fellow home birther, and entrepreneur. I am completely obsessed with birth, more specifically, home birth. And this is a podcast where women share their empowering home birth stories, along with the journey that led them down the path to home birth. Whether you're currently pregnant, planning a home birth with your first or fourth baby, or even just someone who is a complete birth nerd like me, this is the podcast for you. So let's get into this week's empowering home birth story. We are on episode 23 today. We'll be chatting with Catherine, who has been my longtime online friend. So, how fun that we get to chat with her today and hear her home birth story and just everything she has to share about home birth with us. Let's go ahead and bring Catherine on.
My name's Catherine. I'm a mom to three boys, and I'm now a birth doula. And yeah, I mostly specialize in kind of home births and more birth center births. And yeah, that's just a little bit about me. I guess I could go on, but I'll end it there.
Yeah, that's cool. And how did you get into the home birth world? Was it the doula that came first, or was it your home birth that came first?
Home birth definitely came first. I'll say so. I met my one of my closest friends, Kinsey, in a mom group from church. It was like a little mom's night out group, and she was actually pregnant with her second at the time. And it was actually cool because I had had two not so great hospital births. And so she was pregnant with her second. She's actually a doula. And she
Okay.
was having a home birth, and I'm a doula. And I was like, what? Because I had all of these super cool Instagram bloggers that had had home births before, but I didn't know anybody in real life who had ever
Mhm.
had a. And so I was like, this is so cool to actually meet somebody in person who's had a home
Yeah.
birth. So I instantly connected with her, and I wasn't pregnant with my third yet, but my first two hospital births were kind of just not my favorite experiences. And so it was really cool to connect with her and really just like learn about home birth. And so that's kind of how I got into home birth was just connecting with her. She is the one who introduced me to my midwife, who is
Mhm.
amazing. And yeah, so that's kind of how I learned more about it. And she really just introduced me to the home birth world.
Yeah. That's awesome. Do you want to share a little bit about your hospital births?
Yeah, I can totally go into that. So with Lincoln, he's my first. I was 22 when I got pregnant with him. Knew absolutely nothing about birth. All I knew was like what I had seen on TV, which is very like fear based. I feel like you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
Just very much not real life.
Mhm.
And so I went into the OB and they were very much scaring me because I was measuring ahead. He was a big baby. And so the OB was like, hey, you want to try a C-section? Like they just kept dangling that in front of me. Like, he is measuring like 10 pounds. You might not be able to do this. Maybe you should just go for an elective C-section.
Mhm.
And at that point, my mom had had two C-sections herself, and she was kind of like, hey, this might be the easier route. And I was just like scared to do it. I had never had a baby before. And so I was like, maybe I should, like I just didn't know what to do and nobody was really giving me advice.
Yeah.
So we went ahead and scheduled the C-section. I had no idea what to do, but I just didn't really feel right about it. And so it was scheduled for 39 weeks pregnant. And I prayed about it and prayed about it. And I was like, God, I just don't really feel right about this C-section. So if I am not meant to have this C-section, God put me into labor before the appointment, okay? And lo and behold, the C-section was scheduled for 8 a.m. at 39 weeks. My water broke at 4 a.m., middle of the night. That it was insane. Like, I mean, that is a God moment.
Mhm.
So I went into the hospital and it was like a gush, like not like a trickle, not like maybe my water broke. My water full on broke. And so like I heard a physical pop and like it woke me up out of my sleep. So went into the hospital, they were like, yep, you're in labor. So I was like, I have a C-section scheduled. Go ahead and cancel that. I decided I'm just gonna do it, go for it. So I went ahead and did it. But I did get the epidural, I think around like 4 centimeters. And it didn't work. So
Mhm.
it worked on one side, not the other side. And so I was just stuck in bed, but having all the pain. I mean, I think up until like 8 centimeters. And then I was like, it's not working. And they were like, well, let's place it again. So then
Mhm.
I'm at 8 centimeters feeling all this pain. And they're like, let's give you another epidural, but you can't move. And so I'm like having a contraction. They're trying to place another epidural. It was so painful. And so I just didn't like that experience. I got a UTI from the catheter. Didn't even realize that you had to have a catheter. I mean, I knew nothing.
Mhm.
And I didn't like that experience. And I remember I had like started a little motherhood blog after Lincoln was born. And I even wrote a blog post why I will never get another epidural again. Like I literally, so I hated that whole experience.
Mhm.
Reasons why I hated it. And so I was like, for sure, I'm not doing an epidural again with my second. And so here comes Waylon. My babies were only like 17 months apart. Found out I was pregnant with him when Lincoln was only like 10 months old or 9 months old or something. And he was again measuring big, but I was like, it's fine. But then later on, I found out I had high fluid with him. And they
Mhm.
were like, well, let's just do the induction. And I was like, "Well, I think I can do an induction even without an epidural." Like, all I knew was I didn't want the epidural. I didn't really understand Pitocin. Pitocin
Mhm.
was given to me with Lincoln too, my first, because they said that he wasn't like I wasn't progressing fast enough, so they went ahead and just gave that to me,
Yeah.
and like they always do. And so
Mhm.
and so I ended up getting induced with him at 39 weeks, and I was already like 4 centimeters walking around at 4 centimeters for a week too with him, but the induction still took forever. And then I was, having those Pitocin contractions with him where they're very intense, very strong, but I was still convinced no epidural. I was not, I mean, they kept coming in saying, "Oh, you are you sure you don't want the epidural or whatever?" And I was like, "No, not having the epidural." Like I knew I was not about to have it. But then his heart rate started dipping really bad. The D cells,
Mm.
call them, were happening. And I didn't I at that point I was just so focused on my breathing and trying to just get through those contractions that I didn't even realize how bad it was. My husband told me later there was NICU people in the room. The doctors were freaking out. The doctor had come in and told me that I'm about to need an emergency C-section because his heart rate was dropping so low. But again, I just didn't even realize like how much of an emergency it was, which I'm not sure. Again, I was so in and that I'm not sure if it was a true emergency or not. They were like, let's give you the epidural because if not, it's going to be a true emergency C-section. Your husband will not be allowed in the room. we'll rush you off and you will be under anesthesia. You won't get to see your baby.
Mhm.
So if we give you the epidural, at least that way he can be in the room, you'll be awake during it. So I was like, fine. That for that reason, I will get the epidural.
Yeah.
So they gave me the epidural and something happened after that where his heart rate leveled back out. I don't know if it like relaxed my body or something just happened with the baby. I don't know what happened with him, but he ended up being okay after that. And after the epidural, that one actually really did work and I fell asleep. They came and woke me up and said, "You're at a 10, it's time to push." And I pushed him out and everything was fine. So again,
Mhm.
I felt happy, but not like I was happy that the baby was safe and everything was fine, but I still wasn't like feeling like super joyful and calm and empowered and you
Mhm.
know, like it wasn't like that feeling that I got after Jack's home birth where it was like I felt like I was in control and like it was just different than the midwifery care model that I got with Jack's home birth. So
Mhm.
after those two experiences, that's when I met my friend Kinsey, who was my doula. That's kind of where the whole thing starts. So in between those two, there is a little caveat. I found out I had a blood clotting disorder.
Mm.
So it's called factor 5 Leiden. And it just means that I am more prone to getting blood clots.
Mhm.
And so I wasn't sure exactly what that meant. So I actually started that pregnancy off at the OB. I didn't get to start with midwifery care from the very beginning because I wasn't sure if I'd even like qualify for home birth because of that. I was just like, does this make me high risk? Like, what does this exactly mean? Because I
Yeah.
just found all. I didn't know about it with my other two pregnancies or anything. And so I went to the OB and they were like, basically they sent me to the high risk OB and I talked to them and I was like, do you think I can have a home birth? And I was talking to my midwife as well and she wanted me to get checked by the high risk and ask them what they thought. And I also saw a hematologist and the high risk OB like laughed at me and was like, no, you cannot have a home birth. But I asked them like, what is the care plan for me? And they were like, take a baby aspirin. And that was it. Like the entire was to just take a baby aspirin and they didn't even want to see me again. That was it. And like my care plan for the rest of life was just don't be on birth control because I'm basically just more likely to have a blood clot. So like during pregnancy, you're more likely to have a blood clot, or if you're on birth control, you're more likely to have a blood clot. But they're not going to put me on blood thinners until I have a blood clot. Like once you have
Mm.
a, then they would put me on medication. But until then, there's no plan for me. So my midwife was like, "You're good. Like I'll still take you because that's ridiculous if the whole plan is to never see you again, but take a baby aspirin every day as like just like maintenance or whatever." So it was
Yeah.
so I ended up, I think it was around like 14 weeks. Like, have you seen those reels where they're like piecing out of the OB, being like, never see you again? Like, I'm going to my home birth. For like, that was me, like
Yeah.
leaving the OB being like, never see you again. I'm going to have a home birth. So that was, I was so happy that she ended up accepting me. And yeah, so I think it was like from 14 weeks on, I ended up getting under my midwife's care and it was just so cool to have those doctor's appointments on your couch. They do like the ultrasound on your belly, like right there.
Mhm.
Like, obviously, it's not the same as like a full anatomy scan or anything, but I thought those appointments were so cool where the kids could come and talk to her too. And everything was just so different. But anyway, into the actual story. So it was a Thursday morning. Fun fact, I realized me, my husband, and all three of my boys were all born on a Friday,
Oh,
which
wow.
I thought that was so weird. Um,
Yeah.
but I looked that up. I was like, what? But yeah, it was actually like on my due date, I had been having some high blood pressures and I had gotten checked out, gotten my protein tested, and it wasn't preeclampsia or anything. But I had had two friends who had had preeclampsia, and one of them ended in just a bad outcome. It was very sad. But I was really anxious about it turning into preeclampsia and me not getting my home birth. So I was like talking to my midwife, and I was like, what do you think about castor oil? And she was like, if that makes you more comfortable, then go for it. Like, I don't think it's completely necessary. I don't think we're entering into that territory of preeclampsia, but if that makes you feel better and you want to get that baby out, you're at your due date, like go for it. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. So I went for that castor oil. So we dropped my oldest off at ABA. He has autism. So we dropped him off at his ABA clinic. It was one of his ABA days. And me, my husband, and my middle, at the time youngest, went on a hunt for castor oil because I thought that we would just be able to find it. But of course, everywhere was like sold out. It was so weird. So we went to like all these different Walgreens, CVS's, Walmart's looking for castor oil. And it was actually like the perfect morning because we were just like, it was like our last morning together. It just went go around shopping and I kept getting like random little cramps and contractions and like
Mhm.
it was just a fun morning, and then
Mhm.
finally found it. I think at, like, the 7th store, random neighborhood Walmart, like, it was seriously crazy how many we had to go to. And then we, like, picked up some lunch, came home, had lunch. I made a castor oil it was like a coffee smoothie that my midwife had recommended, like, the recipe for, and it was actually really not I wouldn't say it was really good, but it hid the castor oil, so it was not bad. And I actually had a good experience with it. A lot of people say it's, like, really bad, but honestly, I only went to the bathroom, like, 2 times. I didn't feel sick after, I didn't throw up.
Mhm.
So I had a good experience with it. And then I went into full nesting mode. Literally was cleaning the house for like 2 hours and then decided to take a nap. So I fell asleep. My husband went and picked up my son. And then when I woke up, I was having some contractions. So I was like, let's go for a walk. And on this walk, I didn't bring my phone. I was like, I'm just going to be present. But I should have brought it to time them because I could feel that they were 3 or 4 minutes apart already. I was
Mm.
like, whoa, like this is full labor. And
Yeah.
so we probably walked the neighborhood for like an hour. And by the time I got back, it was like dinner time. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm in full labor. So I start like texting my midwife and doula, and I'm like, I'm in full labor. And they were like, oh my gosh. My doula lives like an hour away. And so she was like, I'm gonna start like getting over there. And so we decided that I was gonna put the kids to bed and they were going to come over around like 7:30 that night. And so I decided to read and get the kids to bed, and it was so sweet. As I was reading to the kids, I'm getting a few contractions, and my youngest son, as he could see that I was like in pain, and he was kept saying, "You can lean on me, mommy."
Aw.
It was just the best night, just like knowing that in the morning they're probably gonna have their new sibling and like wake up to their new sibling. And it was just like the sweetest night ever. I just loved that. So then the boys went to bed. I decided to get in the shower and just, like feel clean, put on some comfy clothes to labor in, all that kind of stuff. And by the time I got out, the midwife was already arriving and my doula was already arriving. Everybody was getting there. And I had been doing the mile circuit for a few days, like multiple times a day, because Jack was posterior and it was not a comfy position, let me tell you. If
Yeah.
I have another baby, I am going to make sure that I am like sitting in the right posture because I definitely was not sitting in the right posture at the end of pregnancy, and I think that was part of the reason that he was posterior. So I was had been trying to get him to flip. So my midwife got there and she checked his position and she checked how dilated I was. And I was so happy. I was already at a 5 and he was LOA,
Mhm.
meaning like was in the right position. And I was like literally jumping for joy. My doula walked in and I literally hugged her and was like, I'm at a 5 and he's in position. And I was just like so happy,
Mhm.
freaked out. She was like, "Oh my god." We were like cheering and just like I was in the happiest mood because my other labors, I felt like it just took forever for me to get to a 5. I guess with Waylon, I kind of walked around at a 5, but I remember with Lincoln, I was like at a 1 and then was like at a 3 and then they were like, "We have to do Pitocin." And so I was just happy that I was like starting labor at a 5, that he was in the right position and the mile circuit had worked. And so my midwife started getting the pool ready. We labored in the living room for a while. It definitely felt the best for me to like lean over things. So I was like leaning over the couch and like my doula would like give me that counter pressure and my husband was giving me the counter pressure and he made me a snack and we were kind of just like getting stuff ready and getting situated. And then we got like a heating pad out and a cold rag, and we were just kind of like getting ready. The best part too about a home birth was that my husband, I feel like, was able to really be a really good birth partner. Because in the hospital, it was like I was in the bed, had all these like itchy monitors on, and my
Mhm.
husband kind of over there on his phone. And you know what I mean? He couldn't really do anything. And then he kind of held my leg when I was pushing. And
Yeah.
yeah, but like at the home birth, it was like he was there with me every step of the way. He was always doing something. He was always like we had a birth photographer offer to do our photos for free. And once because my eyes were closed during the labor for most of it, I honestly didn't notice how much he was like right there next to me all the time. So once I saw the photos, I was like, "Oh my gosh," because he was like right here in my ear. He was like right here doing counter pressure, like
Mhm.
every picture. He was literally nice. Oh my gosh, like he's such a good birth partner. And then around like 11:30, I was in the birth pool. I knew I was getting close because my contractions were like super intense, and my midwife had called her assistant to come. I remember my doula at one point was like, "You're getting close." Like she just called the assistant to come in. That's how you know. Like, and obviously I knew because I was like, you know, getting there. Like I could feel how intense it was getting.
Yeah.
Um, but she did check me and told me that I was at a 10, fully complete, but I was in the tub and having zero urge to push. So I was like, like, what's going on with this?
Mhm.
So I feel like what had happened was he had flipped into the wrong position again.
Mm.
So, and he was just, she told me he's like really high up in your pelvis still. And so what we decided was I was also kind of like hot. I don't know if I had been in the tub for like an hour and the water was kind of warm and I was just starting to feel kind of like nauseous and faint and just kind of like whatever. So we decided to do like a little change of scenery. So we got out of the water and do a couple of different positions to see if we could move him down. They were really painful. First, I think we moved to the toilet, which, you know, they call that the dilation station. So we tried that. And then she ended up doing a couple things with like a rebozo kind of a thing. We used a sheet. She tried a couple of things and they definitely worked, but they were definitely painful. They were like trying to get me to like do like the low moans, you know? And I had been pretty like quiet at that point, just like using my breathing. And so I feel like the low moans for me turned into just me like screaming because it was so painful. So I sort of just like lost my peacefulness at like for a little bit at this point and
Mhm.
just like straight up screaming. And my kids, remember, they're asleep. And my bathroom is like the wall of my bathroom is literally against the wall of their bedroom. And I'm like on the toilet trying to like labor down and like well not really labor down because I'm not really pushing, but they're literally right there. And I don't know how they did not wake up. It was a miracle from God that they did not wake up. It was crazy. It was literally crazy. But we tried a couple things. I ended up back in the bed and I had moved around so many, they were like moving me into so many different positions trying to get him down. And they knew that I was getting close. And I remember at one point they asked, "Do you want to get back in the tub?" And I was like, "I cannot move again." Like, I
Mhm.
literally don't think I can move again. And that's my one regret that I did not get back in the tub. I'm kind of bummed because I didn't get my water birth
Yeah.
because not that I was being lazy, but I really feel like if I had just gone back in the tub, I would have gotten my water birth. But I ended up in the bed, and my midwife at that point asked if I wanted her to break my water because she thought that that might be adding to like why he couldn't get down any further. And so she did that. And then all of a sudden, I was able to start pushing. So his head was part of the way out. And she's like, "You need to start doing soft pushes." And I was like, okay, she didn't want me to tear. And I was like, all right. So I started doing soft pushes, and all of a sudden he was out. It was really, really painful, but he was out. Best feeling in the world. I think he was born at 2:41 and then birthed the placenta, nursed him for the first time, did the newborn exam. I mean, it was amazing just having him in my own bed. It's just the best feeling in the world. Like
Mhm.
my doula was You did this. Like, I can't believe that he was, um oh, my midwife told me that out of over 400 something births, that his head broke her record head circumference, and I somehow did not tear.
Wow.
I was
That's
like,
amazing.
I had her though, because she stopped me and was like, "You need to push softly right now." As soon as he came out, she goes, "It is not a small baby," because I remember, I told her I thought he was gonna be 10 pounds this time. I was like, "My other babies, they estimated 10 pounds." Lincoln ended up being 8'14", and that was the one that they were like, "He's gonna be 10 pounds." And then Waylon was 8'11", and Jack was 10'2".
Oh, wow.
And she was like, "No, I think he's just normal sized. I think like 7 or 8 pounds," but he was actually 10'2" with a huge biggest head circumference. Anyway, so they hung out for a while and did obviously all the normal things, and then they left around like 4 or 5 AM, and the boys ended up my older boys woke up around like 6 AM, met their baby brother, and it was just the sweetest thing. They came in their little and they just like peeked over. He was in the bassinet, and they met their baby brother, jumped in bed with us, cuddled up, and I have videos of them. It was just the sweetest.
Oh.
And then my in-laws came and took them for like a day so that we could just rest and hang out. I remember Adam made us like a frozen pizza because there was like nothing else in the house to eat at that point, and he made it, and then we ended up falling asleep before we even ate it because we were so tired. All like the random memories that you have,
Mhm.
of like your first day postpartum. So yeah, that's my home birth story with Jack. It was just such a good memory, like such an amazing experience. And I would do it 1,000 times over at home, even with, you know, all the random little things that went wrong or hurt or
Mhm.
what. I would take that over a hospital birth.
Mhm.
Able to be in your own house and be in your own environment and have the lights dim and not being interrupted a bunch of times and not having like the itchy bands on your belly
Yeah.
and eat and being free and moving around and just all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing. Ah, I love your story. It was so great. I do
Yeah.
wanna ask, how did you feel after your home birth? Like, after you had the baby, what kind of feelings were going through, like, your body, and just how did you feel?
Right after, I remember being like, that hurt. Definitely right after I still had like that pain, but I felt so proud of myself, like just so happy, and just like postpartum is like my favorite time. Breastfeeding, like just the cuddles, like having a
Mhm.
newborn breast is like the best feeling. Like I was just telling my husband, like newborn stage is my favorite stage in the
Mhm.
whole. But yeah, it it feels like the best high in the world.
Mhm.
Like there's no better high than the high of birth. And
Mhm.
so even with my hospital births, I felt a huge high for sure. Like right after they were born, I felt that high. I just didn't feel as supported in the hospital. I didn't feel I just felt kind of annoyed at people for them not letting me eat. I
Mhm.
mean, I don't know. There was just a lot of stuff in between, but yeah, I just felt extreme, like just so blessed, so, like, lucky, just so happy after. He
Mhm.
was so joyful, just the best feeling in the world. Nothing better.
Yeah. I love how
Uh,
you explain that because I do remember you saying how after your hospital birth that you didn't feel, like, empowered, you didn't feel, like, too happy about everything that happened. So,
yeah,
it's crazy just to hear because I had that experience too, where in the hospital, I didn't feel like I had accomplished anything. I felt like I was defeated even though I accomplished what I wanted in the first place. But it didn't feel like that. And then after my home births, I did feel all of that. And that's how we're supposed to feel after birth. We're not supposed to feel like we didn't accomplish anything because we just did the most amazing thing ever. So we're
yeah,
supposed to feel like superwoman on top of the world. So yeah.
Exactly. I feel like with Lincoln, because I had a vaginal birth and I was planning a C-section, I feel like that's why I still felt good after
Yeah.
that. With Waylon's, because I didn't want the epidural and I still ended up with an epidural, I feel like with that one, I felt more defeated. I was like,
Yeah.
dang, like I wasn't supposed to have an epidural. Like I felt really bummed and like people were gonna be like, wow, she said
Yeah.
she blog post that she wasn't gonna girl and she still ended up with like she just couldn't do it. But the reason wasn't because I couldn't do it. It was
Mhm.
because heart rate was literally bottoming out and I almost ended up in an emergency C-section. And that was the point where I was like, I can't go to the hospital again. Like, but anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I also love how you said that your partner was able to kind of be different in the home birth setting than he was in the hospital setting. And I feel like that happens a lot too, because the partner, when they're at home, feels like, okay, this is like my territory. Like, this is where I am like the man of the house. So he can feel like he could take over and like do everything for you and be who he needs to be for you. But at the hospital, it's kind of like, okay, like the doctors take over. This is their territory. He's like handing over everything to the doctors and giving them the authority over like him being with you and all of that. And it's just kind of something that happens in like those settings that they feel like they have to hand it over and they don't know what to do in the hospital because everybody's already coming in, like looking at over at you every 5 minutes for your vitals, for all these things in the hospital that don't happen at home where he can be the one like, "Hey, do you need this? Do you need that? Like, what do you need from me right now?" So,
Exactly.
yeah, I
Yeah, and
really love that.
they're in the way at the hospital too. Like,
Mhm.
I don't know. It's just so different at home. 100%.
Mhm. Yeah. Did you do anything before your home birth to prepare that you didn't do for your hospital births?
I did a few things. I held ice for sure. I tried that a few times just to see if I could like breathe through and feel like I'm having like a contraction and just like practice through that. And then I ate a lot of dates. I didn't at all with my first two, just to like open up the cervix and stuff like that. I read a few books. I listened to more podcasts. Like I did a lot of different like I listened to like home birth stories, kind of like your podcast, but I don't think your podcast existed back then.
No.
Uh, but yeah, I just like followed a lot more people on Instagram that had home births and just tried to focus on like the positive side, like not get anxious and like not think about birth as like a negative kind of experience and
Mhm.
just focus on like how it's a natural process.
Mhm.
It's not the fear, just stuff like that. I feel like with my other two, I honestly was just like, yeah, I just go to the hospital and then and then they just take care of things, or at least with my first. With my second, I definitely did some things, but again, I had two under two. So I don't know. It was just hard because I was
Mhm.
busy and I just didn't feel like birth was something to prepare for as much back then. But now I realize like you actually do have to put some work into it.
Mhm.
So yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I really loved your story and all of your tips that you gave as well. If anyone wants to connect with you, I know you said that you are a doula as well. Where can they find you?
On Instagram at jubilant.birth. And then I have a TikTok too, but I like just started. jubilant.birth.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go ahead and leave those below so anyone can find you and connect with you as well. Is there anything else that you want to share or that's on your mind?
Honestly, just trust your body.
Mhm.
Uh made to do this. So if you are on the fence and you don't know if you can do a home birth because you think that you kind of want to be in the hospital just in case you want to go for the epidural, you can do this. You can do this, mama. Go for it. Go for a home birth. And your body was made for this.
No, I love it. That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing with us.
Of course.
That was so fun getting to chat with Catherine and have her share her story with us. So, thank you to her for coming on and telling us her story. Definitely go ahead and check out her link down below and connect with her on Instagram. If you are currently planning and preparing for a home birth, then I'd love to share with you more information about the Empowered Home Birth course. This is a home birth based birth course, and inside this 8-week program, you will receive educational videos and weekly emails filled with additional resources for you to prepare for your empowering home birth. Once you purchase the course, you also get perks such as access to my entire resource library and private community chats. To enroll, click the link in the show notes and get started on the journey to your empowered home birth. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to share with any family or friends who may benefit from these empowering stories. Also, don't forget to leave a 5-star rating and review to help others who are searching for this information find this podcast. I'll see you next week for another empowering home birth story.